The art of ruling others without force, manipulation, or overt dominance has intrigued philosophers, leaders, and thinkers for centuries. From Machiavelli's cunning tactics to Sun Tzu's strategic deception, the search for influence and control has produced a library of philosophies. But among these voices, the German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer offered something radically different: mastery through modesty and power through pretense. His approach? Play dumb. In a world that often rewards loud confidence and assertive intelligence, Schopenhauer's advice feels counterintuitive, almost absurd. After all, aren't success and leadership about proving yourself, outshining others, and being the smartest person in the room? Perhaps not. Schopenhauer suggested that feigned ignorance, deliberately appearing less intelligent than you truly are, can be an effective tool to gain influence, avoid envy, and ultimately win people over with grace rather than force. This insight wasn't just born out of cold logic, it was personal. At the age of 19, Schopenhauer received a biting letter from his mother, Johanna, a well-known author and socialite. She accused him of always trying to outshine others, constantly correcting people, and suffocating conversations with his intellectual superiority. While she acknowledged his brilliance, she also pointed out how isolating and off-putting it had become. Her words struck a nerve and stayed with him. Rather than reacting defensively, Schopenhauer internalized this criticism. Over time, it shaped one of the most paradoxical elements of his philosophy. True genius doesn't need to prove itself. It observes more than it speaks. It helps others shine, while quietly holding the upper hand. He came to believe that intellectual pride, while personally satisfying, often alienates others. It creates distance, invites resentment, and destroys the very connections that influence requires. In contrast, those who seem less threatening, those who appear dumb or passive, can slip under the radar and hold a kind of invisible power. But what does playing dumb really mean? It's not about being fake, nor is it about denying your intelligence. It's about using self-restraint and strategic silence. It's about understanding human nature so well that you realize influence often comes not from being the loudest voice, but the quietest one with the sharpest mind. So, what can this approach offer us in a practical sense? Can pretending not to know actually help us gain control, respect, and even admiration? According to Schopenhauer, the answer is yes. When used wisely, playing dumb becomes a subtle but effective form of leadership, one that disarms opponents, builds alliances, and earns long-term influence. Let's break it down and explore 5 powerful strategies rooted in this concept. These aren't just abstract ideas, they are practical tools used in daily life, business, relationships, and even warfare. These strategies will show you how feigned ignorance can become one of your most powerful assets if you're bold enough to use it. Strategy 1. The art of surprise: appear weaker than you are, then strike when it counts. One of the most powerful advantages in life is the element of surprise. When you appear to be less capable, less informed, or less ambitious than you actually are, you lower people's defenses. They relax around you. They underestimate you. And that is precisely when you gain the upper hand. Schopenhauer understood that those who wear their intelligence on their sleeve often provoke resistance. People push back against those they perceive as threats, especially in competitive environments. But when you intentionally downplay your strength, you remain underestimated and overlooked. You become the quiet storm that no one sees coming. This strategy isn't about self-sabotage or pretending to be foolish. It's about restraint and timing. It's about letting others expose their positions while you gather information, plan, and wait. And then, when the moment is right, when it truly matters, you deliver with precision, clarity, and force. The impact is far greater because no one expected it from you. Military generals have mastered this throughout history. The legendary Chinese strategist Sun Tzu, whose philosophy on warfare is as much about psychology as it is about battle, wrote, "All warfare is based on deception. When we are able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must appear inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away." In warfare, this meant feigned retreats, ambushes, and playing dead, only to emerge stronger at the perfect moment. In everyday life, this might mean staying quiet in a heated meeting, letting others argue or boast, and then calmly offering a solution that silences the room. In a classroom, it might mean being the student who rarely speaks until they ask the question that stumps even the teacher. This strategy also works because it plays into human psychology. People are quick to judge. They form opinions rapidly based on surface-level behavior. By appearing disinterested, quiet, or unsure, you're often dismissed as a non-threat. That's your advantage. While others are trying to prove themselves, you're conserving energy. You're studying the terrain, and when the opportunity arises, your action feels sharp, decisive, and unforgettable. Even Mahatma Gandhi, known for his non-violent resistance and composed demeanor, emphasized the power of silence and strategic speech. Speak only if it improves upon the silence. That's not just a call for wisdom, it's a warning. Speaking too much reveals your position. Acting too soon reveals your cards. When you operate like the ocean, still on the surface but powerful underneath, you leave people guessing. So the next time you're in a competitive situation, whether it's a business negotiation, a job interview, or a confrontation, resist the urge to show your full power. Let others overestimate themselves. Let them reveal their plans. Then, when the timing is right, strike with precision. The shock value alone gives you an edge, and, more importantly, it earns you the respect of those who finally realize what you're truly capable of. Strategy 2. Lead by listening. Wisdom is knowing when to stay silent. In a world obsessed with speaking, where people rush to make their opinions heard, the true power often lies with those who know when to remain silent, not out of fear or indecision, but out of intentional strategy. Arthur Schopenhauer saw this clearly. To him, the mark of wisdom wasn't the ability to dominate a conversation, but the discipline to hold back. To listen, not because you have nothing to say, but because you understand that information is leverage. There's a dangerous illusion in constantly trying to prove your intelligence. People who talk too much often give themselves away. Their insecurities show. Their lack of depth becomes exposed. Meanwhile, those who listen carefully, who ask questions instead of offering answers, gather insight. They become the ones who truly understand the game being played. Plato put it simply, "Wise men speak because they have something to say. Fools because they have to say something." This isn't just a philosophical musing. It's a principle for power. When you listen, you learn people's fears, desires, contradictions, and blind spots. You learn what motivates them and where they are vulnerable. You're not absent from the moment. You're collecting invisible advantages. In psychological terms, active listening creates connection. People are drawn to those who genuinely pay attention. It makes them feel important, seen, and heard. Ironically, the quiet person in the room often becomes the most respected, not because they impose themselves, but because their silence was deliberate and meaningful. Consider historical figures like Abraham Lincoln, whose leadership style was deeply rooted in observation. Lincoln often listened more than he spoke, collecting the ideas and thoughts of others before delivering a few carefully chosen words that shaped nations. His restraint gave his voice more weight, not less. In the modern world, boardrooms, negotiations, even casual conversations, this principle still holds. The person who rushes to fill every silence is usually broadcasting insecurity. The one who remains calm, who nods, who waits, is often the one in control. They're not reacting, they're absorbing. And when they do speak, the room leans in. Here's the paradox. When you pretend to know less, people show you more. They underestimate you. They speak more freely. They reveal their strategies, their biases, even their mistakes, all while you sit quietly, collecting data. This isn't just listening, it's tactical patience. It's disarming others by appearing non-threatening, all while gaining the clearest picture of what's truly going on. So if you want to lead, don't rush to speak. Ask thoughtful questions. Let others fill the space. Let them show their hands. Then, when you finally offer your input, it carries the weight of wisdom, not noise. True influence isn't about how loudly you talk. It's about how effectively you listen. Strategy 3. Let them think it was their idea. Influence through subtlety, not dominance. There is a quiet, almost invisible power in letting others believe they arrived at a conclusion on their own. Arthur Schopenhauer, a keen observer of human nature, understood that pride and ego are often more delicate than we realize. Rather than confronting someone head-on or trying to prove yourself right, he advised a more refined approach. Guide others subtly, planting the seed of an idea in such a way that they believe the thought was entirely their own. This isn't manipulation, it's a deep understanding of human psychology. Most people resist being corrected, not because they dislike truth, but because correction can feel like a personal attack. It suggests they were wrong, and that can be humiliating, especially when done publicly or forcefully. Schopenhauer recognized that to influence someone meaningfully, you must protect their self-image. By stepping back and allowing others to take credit for a thought, you not only preserve their dignity, you actually deepen their attachment to the idea. This strategy works in every area of life. In parenting, for example, rather than forcing a child to take a certain path, a wise parent might guide with questions and encouragement, allowing the child to discover the right choice. The same applies in teaching, leadership, and even personal relationships. When someone feels that a solution was their own, they embrace it more fully. They feel empowered, not coerced. In the workplace, this method often plays out in meetings and collaborations. Instead of challenging a superior or colleague by directly opposing their idea, a thoughtful individual might introduce a suggestion as a minor addition or pose a question that leads others to reconsider. Over time, the idea gains traction, not because it was forced, but because it was gently guided into place. People adopt it more willingly, and the originator avoids unnecessary conflict. This approach is not about pretending to be inferior or avoiding confrontation out of fear. On the contrary, it requires confidence and wisdom. Schopenhauer wrote, "To play the fool is the last resort in order to cover the defects of others." What he meant was that sometimes appearing less intelligent or less assertive is a conscious, generous act. It allows others to save face. It spares them from the discomfort of feeling outsmarted or exposed. When you constantly correct others, even when you're right, you risk looking arrogant or condescending. But when you allow others to shine, even if the light came from your spark, you demonstrate maturity. You show that your ego doesn't need applause and that your aim is effectiveness, not attention. In the end, this strategy builds deeper respect than force ever could. While some seek control through dominance, the truly wise influence through subtlety. They understand that if people believe an idea is theirs, they will defend it, cherish it, and act on it with conviction. And that, Schopenhauer knew, is the secret to lasting influence. Strategy 4. Avoid the spotlight until it matters. Stay low-key until your moment comes. In a world obsessed with visibility, likes, and validation, it can seem counterintuitive to hide your talents. But Arthur Schopenhauer believed that real power doesn't need to announce itself. Instead of constantly trying to prove your worth, he advocated for a quieter strength, one that holds back, studies the room, and waits for the perfect moment to act. The idea is simple. Remain unnoticed until your contribution is impossible to ignore. This doesn't mean downplaying your abilities out of insecurity. It means having the wisdom to know when attention is premature. By avoiding the spotlight early on, you build suspense. You gather information, observe others, and prepare yourself. Then, when the right opportunity arises, when others have exhausted themselves or made errors, you step forward with precision, leaving a lasting impact. It's not about hiding who you are. It's about revealing yourself only when it matters most. The Chinese classic Tao Te Ching speaks of this principle poetically, saying, "The sage wears rough clothing and holds the jewel in his heart." True value doesn't clamor for approval. It rests quietly, knowing its worth. That's why some of the most effective people in history have been those who were underestimated at first. Their strength lay not in flamboyance, but in restraint. And when they finally revealed what they were capable of, the effect was unforgettable. Even Socrates, one of the most influential thinkers of all time, used this method. He often pretended to know less than he did, asking simple questions, inviting others to speak freely. But behind that feigned ignorance was a razor-sharp intellect. By making others feel comfortable, even superior, he was able to expose contradictions in their thinking and lead them to greater truths. What appeared to be weakness was, in fact, mastery. Schopenhauer warned against the constant need for recognition, describing it as a trap. When you live for attention, you lose control of your power. You start performing rather than progressing. You speak before you understand, act before you're ready, and burn out before you've built anything meaningful. But when you're content to work in silence, to prepare without applause, you gain something invaluable: depth. And when the time finally comes to step into the light, you're not scrambling to prove yourself, you simply are. What's strategy 5? Win through humility. Let your success speak quietly. Nothing repels people more than arrogance. The moment you start broadcasting your victories, you invite resentment, competition, and even sabotage. Loud victories might grab attention, but they rarely earn admiration. In fact, the more noise you make about your accomplishments, the more you expose yourself to envy, and the less impressive your success becomes in the eyes of others. As the legendary figure Frank Lucas once put it, "The loudest one in the room is the weakest one in the room." Arthur Schopenhauer echoed this sentiment long before it became a street mantra. He believed that real strength is silent, subtle, and even a little mysterious. The wise man, he argued, often plays the fool, not because he is won, but because he understands the power of being underestimated. When people don't see you as a threat, they lower their guard. They speak more openly. They reveal their insecurities and flaws. And while they're busy showing off, you're quietly learning, growing, and preparing. There is a quiet dignity in humility. If you succeed when no one expects it, and then downplay that success, you create a ripple effect. People begin to admire your grace more than your achievement. You become respected not just for what you've done, but for how you carry it. And that is a rare kind of influence. It's the kind that can't be faked, and it lasts far longer than any moment of applause. Humility doesn't mean thinking less of yourself. It means thinking of yourself less. It means resisting the urge to shout, "Look what I did," and instead letting your work, your consistency, and your results speak for you. Schopenhauer knew that when you are truly excellent at something, you don't need to declare it. The world will notice on its own, and when it does, it will respect you far more for your restraint. In a culture that rewards loud confidence and constant self-promotion, humility is a form of quiet rebellion, and those who master it tend to win in the long run, not just in status or success, but in peace of mind, character, and legacy. These 5 strategies drawn from the philosophy of Arthur Schopenhauer reveal something counterintuitive but profoundly true. Playing dumb isn't weakness, it's wisdom in disguise. The person who doesn't need to prove anything, who allows others to speak first, who steps aside and watches rather than rushes to lead, is often the one with the deepest insight and the greatest power. By staying silent when others are loud, by letting fools expose themselves, by avoiding premature recognition, and by letting your success whisper instead of scream, you gain something few people ever understand: leverage. You conserve your energy, you protect your position, and most importantly, you elevate yourself without anyone seeing it coming. In a world obsessed with being seen, sometimes your greatest strength lies in what you choose to hide. Stay humble, stay quiet, stay dangerous,